Welcome to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Baines. And if you're passionate about powerful stories rooted in faith, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you like what you hear, hit that like button or leave a review. It really helps us reach more listeners like you. Today's guest is James C. Magruder, a gifted author who made the leap from advertising to Christian fiction. In our conversation, he opens up about how grief deepened his faith, how themes of love and loss shaped his storytelling, and why the male perspective still matters in today's literary world. You'll hear about his award-winning novel, The Desert Between Us, and get a glimpse of what's ahead in his writing journey. Let's get started. Well, hi, Jim. It's so good of you to join us today on this issue of the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Jim Magruder. I go formerly by James C. Magruder in all of my writings. I've been writing for about 40 years. I write Christian fiction. I come from an advertising background, and I just had an award-winning book come out called The Desert Between Us, and look forward to talking to you about it today, Mike.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you join us. So, are you located on the West Coast?
No, I'm located in Wisconsin.
Oh, that's right.
I'm in a city, Racine, Wisconsin, which is 25 miles south of Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So I'm right on the southeastern corner.
Right. I've had some enjoyable times up at Eagle River, Wisconsin, and that
beautiful
part of the state. Have you always lived in that general area?
Yeah, I was born and raised here and went to school at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, about 60 miles west of here, but always been in this area.
Well, I know that Wisconsin is just a beautiful state, and as long as you've lived in the area, I bet you have some special places that you like to go to maybe refresh your soul or recharge your batteries.
Yeah, I would say there's two spots. One is Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which is maybe 50 miles west. Mm-hmm. Takes about an hour to get there, a little bit less, and it's a beautiful tourist town, sort of the kind you'd see out of a Hallmark movie or something, but it's beautiful, and it's right on the lake, and it has everything, wonderful restaurants, beautiful scenery, great town, very, very quaint. And then, of course, there's Door County in Wisconsin, right up the peninsula, the thumb of Wisconsin, as they say. So you just drive up that peninsula, and there's Fish Creek there, and Egg Harbor, and Ellison Bay, and several little towns, and they're all right next to each other. And that also is just out of a movie, but they're two beautiful areas to just relax.
Well, I have some questions that I like to ask that kind of give our audience a little bit of insight. What are three of your favorite songs, Jim?
Well, with one song I've always really enjoyed is God Only Knows by Brian Wilson. And with his recent death on June 11th, he passed away. They've been playing that song again and again. And it's just a beautiful melody, and I've done a little research on it, YouTube and whatnot, and saw how it was put together with the various instruments and the timing and the lyrics and the whole creative process. And it's just a really beautiful song. So, plus I also love the title, God Only Knows, because you can apply that to so many different areas of your life. Another song I've always loved is a Beatles song called In My Life. And that's often been called one of the most popular songs ever written, along with God Only Knows, both of them. In fact, the Beatles thought the best song ever written. Paul McCartney said the best song ever written was God Only Knows by Brian Wilson. And other experts have said In My Life is an awfully good song. The reason I've always loved that one is because it's so reflective. And that ties right into my writing, Mike, in the sense that I consider myself, and others have called me, the reflective writer. And that's one difference in my writing versus maybe someone else's writing is I'm very reflective in the way I approach a story so that the average reader will want to reflect on what I'm saying in their own life. A third song I really like, again, it's another secular song. It's called Make It With You by Bread. It was popular in the early 70s. And that's simply because it's unbelievably beautiful song sung by David Gates of Bread, and his voice is just crystal clear. And but what all three have in common is they are all to some degree very reflective, and they are memory oriented, particularly in my life, because in that song they're reflecting on memories. So I can tell that there's a trend in the way I like things and how they trace back to the way I think, the way I am, and the way I write.
Yeah, in my life will remind us that some of our loved ones have passed on. And so some are dead, some are living.
Yeah, exactly right.
An interesting line.
And the opening line, in places I remember.
Yeah, yep.
Again, reflective.
Yeah. Along the same line, do you have 3 reflective movies?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. That's always been a hard question for me because there's so many great movies, right? But I definitely land on reflective movies too, instead of action adventure, as much as I like that. I would say one of my favorite movies is Field of Dreams, particularly because of the last scene with him playing catch with his father. Again, it's reflective and it's relational. The whole point of the story is the relationship with the father and the son. If you remember that last scene, it's just very powerful when his father's come back out of the cornfield and is throwing a ball to him. The whole movie, he's trying to reconcile his relationship with his father. At the beginning of the movie, he says, I wake up every day and I think I'm becoming my father. And he does that as a negative. But I think we all reach a point in life that we may say that, if I'm like my father, that's a good thing, given if your father is a good man. And my father was a great man of integrity. And so I love the feeling of that movie. Another movie I like is While You Were Sleeping with Sandra Bullock and Peter Gallagher and Bill Pullman. And that's a hilarious movie. That's a romantic comedy. So that's a little different than it being reflective. But that's the story of a girl fantasizes that she loves a man who's a stranger to her. And he gets in an accident by a train where she works, and she saves his life, and he's in a coma.
Yes.
And she's still thinking she loves this guy, and the hospital staff thinks that they're engaged because she got him to the hospital, and she doesn't even know him. And as he starts to she becomes familiar with the family, they think they're engaged while he's still in his coma. And while he's in his coma, she's falling in love with his brother. And he finally says to her at the end of the movie, when did this happen that you fell in love with my brother? Well, it was while you were sleeping. And that's a hilarious one. And then the final one I think everybody loves, and again, for all the same reasons, is, the Jimmy Stewart film, It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Because who cannot love the concept of what would life be like if you were never born?
Right.
And that's extremely reflective. And that's something we probably all wonder at some point in our life is, are we making an impact?
Exactly.
And that's the beauty of writing too, is that I believe personally that words have the power to change lives. And so I write to inspire, and I write to have people reflect.
Yeah, we all, as you say, want to know, are we making a difference? Am I doing anything worthwhile? And Max Lucado said man's 2 greatest fears. One is the fear of death, and the other is the fear of insignificance. And if we're not careful, we can all fall into that idea. Am I insignificant?
Yeah.
So we need to take comfort in the fact that we can't be insignificant because God sent His Son to die for each one of us. So we must be significant.
And we have to tell ourselves that, Mike, because to be any different would be to say Christ died in vain.
Yeah.
He didn't die in vain. He died for you and for me, and He would have died just for you or just for me. And that's illustrated in Scripture. So I think that we need to find our significance in Christ.
Definitely.
Otherwise, He just wouldn't have paid that penalty.
Yeah. That kind of leads us into my next question. Would you mind tell us a little bit about your walk with Christ?
Okay. Well, I always say that grief led me to God. And that's part of the reason why I wrote my book, The Desert Between Us, is I wanted to tell a story about overcoming grief and having victory in grief. And when I was 11 years old, my mother died of cancer.
Oh.
And I'll never forget that day. It was exactly 60 years ago on June 6th, so just a few days ago. It was the 60th anniversary of my mom dying. I remember my dad coming home from the hospital, and of course all of us kids knew she was sick. I'm one of 6 children. And he came home from the hospital with my aunt and uncle that day, and there was a grim look on his face. And he called us all into his bedroom. And he said just 5 words to us, Mike. He said, "Your mother passed away today." And that sent a shockwave through the whole family. And we all behaved differently. Like I said, he was with my aunt and uncle, so they're still outnumbered 2-1. 6 kids and 3 adults. And 3 of us ran to my aunt, and she opened her arms and surrounded us with her arms and pulled us into her as she was crying and we were crying. And then that left 3 other kids. Well, as we were actually wailing, it scared the youngest, who was 4 years old. We ranged in age from 4 to 14. So the 4-year-old now is screaming because why is everybody else screaming? Yeah. She doesn't fully understand. So my father picks her up. Well, that leaves 2 unattended. That would be my older brother, Chris, who wandered outside in disbelief and denial and said, this can't be happening. And why would God allow her mother to die? Yeah. So he's outside wandering on his own now in the summer day. And then that left my younger brother, Bob, who went upstairs and grabbed his pillow and slid under his bed and laid under his pillow till darkness, which illustrates how grief affects everyone differently and affects children differently, and even affects children differently than adults. And so that was what started me down the road of wondering, why would God allow this to happen? And so I was only 11 at the time, but then I started thinking about, is God good or is God bad, or why would He allow this type of thing? And as I started to mature and grow older, by the time I got to high school, I was asking questions about, is there a God and why would He allow it to happen? And I started searching for answers. And I ran into Christians in my high school class who could try to help me find the answer to these questions, and would tell me about the character and nature of God. I started attending Bible studies, and by the time I was 19, I had met a number of Christians and attended a number of Bible studies, and they shared the gospel with me. And I can tell you with certainty that on August 19th, 1973, at 1 o'clock in the morning, in my Volkswagen car, when I put my head on my steering wheel, I prayed to receive Christ with a friend who made the gospel crystal clear to me. And I claimed Christ for myself, for my own, and confessed my sins and asked for Him to lead me to live a life in Christ. By the blood of Christ. And it's just been a fantastic thing,
Yeah, you have quite the testimony there.
So that's why I say grief led me to God. It led me on a journey and a search for answers. Now I share my testimony with a lot of people, and I always say this at the end, is I tell them, Listen, I was searching for one main question, the answer to one main question. Why would God allow my mother to die? Well, she just had 6 children, and my father was an amazing man. And I tell them that now, 60 years later, I still do not have the answer to that question, and I never will. But I don't need to, because I found God in the process. The whys will not be important in heaven, and they faded here. I don't need God to answer that question for me to know He is faithful. And so I just trust Him, not knowing the answer to that one main question that I really wanted Him to answer.
Yeah, when you boil it all down, it's really just me and my Savior.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. And again, when I get there, I'll know why He called her home, but it won't matter. Right. I feel bad more for her sake, not seeing her 6 children grow up,
Yeah.
So that can play with my head sometimes, but
sure.
Otherwise, I'm content.
I suppose it's not exactly the same, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to get to see my great-grandchildren grow up.
Yeah.
I mean, we are finite here.
We are finite.
Things are going to end. We need to have our bags packed and ready. And I say bags packed quite loosely because we're not going to carry anything out. Just what we brought in, we'll take out.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, now you said you worked in advertising?
Yes.
And so what sparked you to start writing Christian fiction?
Well, I graduated with degrees in advertising and marketing, both bachelor's and master's, and have an MBA and a BBA degree. And I spent 40 years in advertising. And advertising is, if you study advertising at all, you'll know that it's very conversational because the advertiser is talking to you as the consumer, right? So It's conversational in tone. And I think that prepared me to write fiction because so much of fiction is conversational in tone. But what really started me down the fictional route was my wife. My wife, Karen, suggested that I consider writing fiction because I had been writing nonfiction. I've been writing for 40 years total, and I've spent most of the time writing nonfiction. I've written for 11 Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and I've got stories published nationally everywhere, right? But she said, why don't you generate your own story, come up with your own ideas that you believe God given you, develop a theme and a message, and craft that the way you would do it as creatively you can, and take that message to your readers. And then it'll be sort of your own instead of, writing, something nonfiction based on factual evidence and whatnot. So I tried it, and I'm on my 4th novel now, so I'm kind of beginning at it in a way. I mean, I've been doing it for the last several years, but I'm on the 4th novel now, and the second one, The Desert Between Us, that we're going to be talking a little bit about, that's the one that just won 2 awards and is doing so well.
Great.
But I love doing it, and you'll see that when we get to those parts of the questions, the Desert Between Us ties right into victory over grief, because it's a love after loss, victory over grief story. It sort of ties right into my parents and what happened to them. Only I use fictional characters and younger characters.
Yeah. I would think you can take your non-fictional books, and of course you kept them true to the story because they're non-fiction. And at some point in time, you might have thought, this could have went some other way as you're writing that.
Yes.
That'd be a good book. But
yeah.
I'm writing nonfiction, so, you don't want to get distracted. Now you can be as distracted as you want and let your imagination have full reign and run as far as it wants to.
Right.
So do you think you're going to stick with the fiction or whichever way the wind blows?
Well, I think I'm pretty committed to fiction. So yeah, I'll stick with fiction as far as books go. But I'll do nonfiction for the sake of articles and things like that. Because I'm still writing for Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And there's so many things I learned about raising children and building a good marriage and all those kind of things. And I've written for magazines and published my articles on marriage, on children, on raising kids, all of that. So there'll still be a whole nonfiction section of my life that I'll be writing about because I'll be writing about what's happening in my life.
Yeah.
But for the creative aspect of it all, I'll probably also stick with fiction for sure because I want to craft messages and take them to readers. I'm a very thematic writer. My first book called The Glimpse is about, it's basically about forgiveness and reconciliation, right? And that's between a father and a son. So that's something very relational and reflective that I want people to be thinking about. The new book or the current book, which The Desert Between Us, that's victory, that's love after loss, victory over grief. Can you love again if you lose your spouse prematurely? And if you do, can you give yourself permission to love again? And secondly, if you give yourself permission to love again, can you ever love the same again as deeply? Because that's what my father faced. So you see, that's another theme. Then I just finished, it's currently at publishers now being considered for publication, a Christmas novella called The Christmas Photograph. And that's how a photograph from 58 years ago will reunite a grandfather, father, and son, grandson, adult grandson. And so that speaks a lot about reconciliation between the relationship. And now the fourth one is called The View from a Distant Mountain. And that's based on the premise or the theme that sometimes it's only when we reach the mountaintop of our experience do we realize that we've scaled the wrong mountain. And this will be a character who is more committed to his career than his family. So when he reaches that mountaintop, he'll realize he scaled the wrong mountain. So you see, they're all based on themes. And then I create characters that can support these themes and that type of thing. And eventually the characters become so deep that the theme is a gentle current through the whole book. But I want people to be thinking about these kind of things because, like I say, I write about things that are reflective and very relational. And that's why I write contemporary Christian fiction.
Well, are there any biblical truths or passages that tend to anchor, the book we're going to discuss today?
Yeah, I think of Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for your welfare, not for calamity, plans to give you a future and a hope. Because in the desert between us, there is calamity that takes place. There's a tragedy that takes place early on, and he has to find a way to overcome it. And so I think the book by nature is very inspirational and will inspire people to believe I can have victory over the grief I'm going through. And so I want people to believe that God provides and he gives us a future and a hope, even when the here and now could be devastating.
Well, it sounds like that's how your book can connect with men, boys, or entire families. It's just that hope that there is a plan, and it's a plan for their good, for our good.
Right. And I think this book does a good job of that. I've got a copy of it here. This is what it sort of looks like. It's got a tree house on the cover. This is one of the awards it recently won. But the reason it'll affect men and boys is because the main character who loses his spouse, he's a 37-year-old man, and he has to raise his 8-year-old son by himself as a result of what's just happened. But he consults with his father.
Oh.
So there's a grandfather, father, and son.
Yeah.
And the grandfather lost his wife when he was young as well. And so you see that the man in the middle, shall we say, Chase Kincaid, he's the 37-year-old who just lost his wife, and he has the 8-year-old son. But his father lost his wife as well when he was a boy. So the main character lost both a mother and a wife. Okay? So now, the relationship between the three of them is what's so interesting, is how they help each other overcome what's happened. And the main character that I seem to enjoy the most would be the 8-year-old boy, because basically, Mike, I was the 8-year-old boy, because all the questions, although I was 12 when I lost my mom, 11, I have this 8-year-old character asking all the questions I wondered about.
Yeah.
You know, what do we do now? How am I going to be different as a result of losing my mom? Why would God do this? All these things are in the book, and the answers are coming out between the father and the grandfather and these kind of things. And the Bible plays a role in it, in a subtle sort of way, but he'll find some answers in the Bible about why this happens and how we can go on. So I think it speaks to men in a great way. And I have a real passion to speak to men. I want to speak to men. And the men don't read nearly as much as women. And women often have to buy the book for a man to read it. And so I have to speak to women as well as men. But I do have a passion to talk to men and say, hey, look, let's consider these things. These things are important, particularly Christian men.
Yeah, I can hear it. Honey, I bought a book I'd like you to read.
Yes.
And that, of course, reminds me of other things. Like, you know, ladies, if your man says he's going to do something, rest assured he's going to do it. You don't need to remind him every 6 months.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, the women do have a big task set out if they want their husband to start absorbing some biblical principles, just to help him and their sons react in biblical ways. We fill ourselves with our environment, and if it doesn't have anything biblical in it except maybe Sunday morning, then you're missing something. The world is having a greater influence on you than that Sunday morning message.
Yeah.
So I do think it's important. The first Christian fiction author, in my opinion, was Jesus Christ. He gave us these nice, short, impactful parables. No one in particular could be anyone. So it's fiction teaching a message.
Exactly right.
And of course, I can get on a soapbox very easy about Christian fiction that is romance-centered. And I feel like, conflict is nothing more than unrealized expectations, especially if you have a young, impressionable young lady reading her mother's romance novels. She gets the idea of what it's going to be like when Prince Charming comes along. And meanwhile, her future Prince Charming is scanning the computer because these pornographic images keep coming up, and he thinks he understands what women are like because he sees them on the internet. And when princess meets the prince, there's going to be a conflict, and I just think we need to avoid that. So I think that's why it's so important that young boys read biblically principled fiction.
Right. Right. I have a little tagline for what I'm doing, and I call it fiction with conviction, because I want there to be a message there that they think about.
Yeah, I like that. Fiction with conviction. Yeah. So how do you hope your book sharpens the faith of the reader? That's kind of what we were just talking about.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to do is naturally I write to inspire, as I've said. And that's what I want to do. I want to inspire readers, but I also want them to realize that God is not only the great physician, but he's a great provider. And he's not going to leave you as an orphan, so to speak. And of course, I was sort of feeling like that as a boy when I lost my mom. To lose half your parents, right? You feel like I've lost something so significant. If anything happens to my father, now I am an orphan. And I want them to believe that God will provide for them, even through grief. There is victory over grief, and that's why I call this story, The Desert Between Us, the sort of a love after loss, victory over grief. You're not going to be left in your grief. He was a man of sorrows. He was acquainted with grief, and he's not going to leave you there. You're going to find a way through the grief. So don't give up. And I think a beautiful part of this book, Mike, is the fact that I have the main character. His name is Chase Kincaid, 37-year-old father who just lost his wife, the love of his life. And to help himself heal, he keeps a journal of his feelings. Mm. And so there are 11 journal entries throughout the book. And when you read what he's writing about and how he's coping and how he's trying to figure out how he feels and how his feelings are changing, I think it's going to help male readers. And it'll probably make female readers cry, and it'll probably help male readers realize, wait a minute, he feels just like I would feel. Now, how is he going to do this? And I had several Amazon reviews, and they said the same thing. And here's what it said. Watching your characters heal are helping me heal. So I know a number of people who have read the book are going through grief right now. And they're seeing that, hey, these characters are helping me heal by seeing how they heal. And I think the journal entries convey what's going on in the man's heart. And so it gives you an opportunity to look in and see and feel what the main character is feeling. And I think it draws you right in and makes a very interesting writer's device to make points and to illustrate how this man will finally get past his grief.
I can certainly see how that would work. If you're talking to a friend or a counselor, you're somewhat guarded.
Yes.
You may not want to let all of your feelings be known, or, but if you pick up and read a book, you're by yourself, no one else is there, and you're open. You can hear what you read, and it can be more healing than if you were talking to another person.
Yeah.
Because men, we got to be strong, and I'm certainly not going to cry in front of another person. But when you're hurting and you read something that speaks to you, doesn't matter if you cry or not. No one's there to judge you.
Right.
So,
and I talked about the value of a good cleansing cry in this book too. It's something men don't want to do.
No.
And when he eventually finds a new love interest and he's starting to trust her, they go for a walk along the beach. It takes place in Santa Barbara, California, which is very much like, say, Hawaii. It's very, very beautiful. And they're walking along the beach, and she asks him, have you ever cried about your loss? And he said, yeah, I did once. When she died, I really cried. And she says to him, well, what makes you think once is enough? And it speaks to the fact that grief doesn't have a timeline, and to think you can get over it and cope with it by being emotional about it once is you're kidding yourself. And there are several other real things to cope with grief that I've worked into the book. And I even have him go see a grief counselor, and they talk. And one thing they decide to do is that he's starting to lose track of his son because they're grieving out of sync. Okay? So the father is starting to recover before the son, or vice versa, for example. And once they start grieving out of sync, they start losing touch with each other. And he knows, as a father, I need to stay in the same pattern with my son, or I will leave him behind. So what do I do? And when he gets some advice, both from his new love interest and the grief counselor and the social worker at the school, because his son is doing poorly in school because of his grief, they tell him, you need to have a special project to bond with your son. And so what they decide to do is they decide to build a treehouse together. Again, that's on the cover of the book. And by building a treehouse together, gives them an opportunity to bond, because that's another device I use in the book, is that the treehouse is something every kid loves a fort. And everybody loves a treehouse. So I used the treehouse as a device and put them in it. After it was finished, they build it together. And once it's built, they start to sleep in it. And I'll only tell you this because I don't want to tell you too much, but the conversations, Mike, that go on when they're sleeping in the treehouse are the conversations that bring the greatest amount of healing. And while you're thinking of the father and his conversation is helping his son heal, you'll see that it's the son who's helping his father heal by helping him figure out if he can ever love again, if he can ever give himself permission to love again. So there's some really touching moments in the treehouse. And I think men would enjoy it. And I know boys would.
Well, my next question is, do you see your writing more as a ministry, mission, or message? And if so, how so? But sense that it's none of those things. It's what you are supposed to write.
Yeah.
And whether it's a mission or ministry or not doesn't really matter, because I don't think you could write the same thing if you said, well, I've got to write something inspirational here. But when you have something on your heart that you want to write, then that's why you write it, because it's there and you need to put it on paper.
Right. And if you asked me why I wrote it because, for years I saw how my father dealt with the loss of his wife, my mother. And I always wondered if my father would give himself permission to love again.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, if he could give himself permission to love again, could he ever love the same again? Or how would it be different? And I'm not going to tell you what my father did, because that's the last page of the book.
Oh, I was going to ask, and I was going to ask.
The last page of the book, I have here, it says a tribute, or it says a special message from the author, right here. And I tell you what my father did after you've read what the main character does, right? And it's interesting, but I won't give that away.
I don't blame you. And you don't want to ruin it for the audience.
Yeah. So, but it's an interesting read. And I think it's a question that all of us can ask ourselves, whether our spouses are healthy or not. What would I do if the worst that could happen happened, right? My wife and I have talked about this over the years, but the reason I wrote it was I wanted to demonstrate the love my father had for my mother and my mother for him. And I wanted the reader to end finish reading the book, at the end say to themselves, can I love like that?
Yeah.
Can I love like that? And inspire them to do so. You know, I mean, the book will have two audiences in a way. It'll have the audience of the people who've lost their spouse. Okay? And it'll have the audience of people who haven't lost their spouse. But now, based on the fact of reading this, how do I want to treat my spouse differently?
Yeah.
How do I want to communicate the depth of my love to her more? Because I would hate to go through what the main character did if anything was left unsaid.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine that men would read it with a different light than women.
Yeah.
Just because we are different.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk to men about how they feel, but I got some very nice reviews on Amazon from men. It's been very encouraging. Yeah. So if men read it, it touches them. But you got to get a man to read a book first.
That's the chore.
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So do you read much Christian fiction?
Yeah. Yeah. I can't write it without reading it.
I'm
reading 2 books right now, and I read 2 at a time all the time.
Oh, wow. So how do you think Christian fiction is doing today? Is it falling short? Is it meeting the mark?
It's getting a lot better, but where I thought it could be improved is, the first question to ask yourself is, who is the audience, right? And just because it's Christian fiction doesn't mean only Christians are reading it.
Right.
In fact, I don't want just Christians to read what I'm writing. I want to reach non-Christians as well. Because there's nothing in this story that prevents a non-Christian from reading it. It's equally entertaining. And that's why I'm writing it. I want to be evangelistic in nature. But you got to ask yourself, who's your audience? And if you're trying to reach just Christians, you might write it slightly differently. I want to reach non-Christians as well. But I think the downfall in Christian fiction today is when they write on things that come across as the stereotypical Christian. For example, if you have a scene where the family's going to sit down to eat a meal together, and then the writer feels obligated, well, I got to pray before we eat. And then they have a prayer in the book, and it comes across to maybe a non-Christian reading the book as either forced or almost corny, or I can't relate to it. So I think we got to be careful how we portray the Christian life. Are there more creative ways we can do that without compromise? But can we do it in such a way that the Christian life is appealing? I've always tried to live the Christian life in an appealing way without compromise, but to show people that my faith is not spooky. It's not weird. It's not strange. Jesus Christ died for my sins. Hey, somebody saved me, and it was Jesus Christ. Yeah. And he said we're all fall short of the glory of God, and that we all sin. This is very relevant. So I've always tried to make my faith very relevant to a non-Christian. I do the same thing in my writing so that it doesn't come across as odd or not contemporary or doesn't fit in with society. We need to fit in with society now more than ever before. So I want my work and my words and everything to be relevant and timely and uncompromising, but appealing as well and entertaining. And I try not to be preachy in any other way. And in any way, like sometimes I think that's a flaw of Christian fiction too, is it can come across really preachy and not natural.
Was there a Christian author that kind of shaped how you write?
Well, I study a lot of writers. Of course, I love Max Lucado, but he's nonfiction. Richard Paul Evans is not necessarily, I don't know what his faith background is. It may not be born again Christian, but it's intended to be God honoring. I've learned so much from him. I really like Dan Walsh, who I know you interviewed recently.
Yeah.
But I think the person that influenced me to write the most was an author by the name of Ethel Hare. She wrote a book called The Introduction to Christian Writing. And I have it on my bookshelf behind me. And that book spoke to me more than any other book I've ever written about the writer's life and whether or not I should pursue it. So I think that she's had the greatest influence on me. And that book is so good. It's written, every chapter is divided in 2 parts, part 1, part 2. Part 1 is sort of inspirational about parts of the writer's life that you need to develop. And part 2 is instructional about how to do it, how to write effective sentences, how to avoid adverbs, how to do a better job developing the opening of a story, how to write good endings, all of that. So it's instructional and inspirational. And by reading that book, when I read it, because I can see all my notes in the book because I wrote in the margins, that was the book that said, Jim, I think God is telling you to write. And I probably read it 30 years ago or something like that, or 25 years ago or more than that. And it got me really involved, really committed. So Ethel Hare, that I don't know if she's still around or not, but I did see in a bookstore an updated version of this one. So maybe she's still writing, but that was the life-changing book for
me. I kind of believe that there's a difference between authors and writers. And
yeah.
I guess you could argue it any way, but I used to think authors were just, wow, those people are something. But I found out if you can put some sentences on a piece of paper, you can get it published and with your name on the front cover and you're an author.
Yeah. Well, I think the writer has a discipline to write. You're right. You're correct on that. My process is to try to write from either 8 or 9 to noon, get as much done as I can in that time period. Then the afternoon is spent promoting, social media, answering emails, the business of writing. The creativity of writing is the morning. The business of writing is the afternoon, to break it down simply. But it's every day, except weekends.
Yeah.
So I'm going at it pretty hard for a guy that doesn't have to. But I think that's what it takes.
Is there something you think God wanted you to get while you were writing?
I think he just wanted to shape me and test me and see if I was committed to his call. And he did that through rejection. My first book, I contacted 40 agents, and I was turned down by 40 agents. The 41st one worked with me for about a year. And then she changed her business model and no longer did fiction, just focused on nonfiction, so I lost her. So now I lost 41 agents. Now I have an agent, but now, today. But in those years, I didn't. And my articles sometimes were rejected. I used to say, I have enough rejection letters to paper a room. And it's true. So there's a lot of rejection in the writing field, of course, because supply is much greater than demand.
Oh my.
And, for example, I write for Chicken Soup for the Soul, and they published 11 stories so far. And they have one right now for another Christmas book. But, I've had lunch with the editor-in-chief and owner, Amy Newmark, And she has told me that we get 5,000 articles for every title, every book. And we narrow it down to the top 101, and everybody else is rejected because we only have room for 101 stories per book.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that doesn't mean that all the ones that were rejected were not good stories. They just selected 101 out of 5,000. So, you could be encouraged that your story was good, even if it wasn't selected. But you got to keep facing rejection. And I learned how to get through rejection. I even wrote a story about it. When I had a story rejected once, and I felt so bad about it. I moped around the house for a week, and then I sat down and wrote an article called Writing Through Rejection. And it was about how to keep writing. And the best way to get through rejection is to write through it. So write an article. So I wrote that article, and it was published nationally.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's what you have to do. But I think God tested me by saying, how serious are you about this, and how much can you take? My friends have said to me, man, you've been beat up a lot, but you keep going.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do.
Could you give us one sentence to convince a skeptical man to read your book?
Well, what I would say to that person is basically just tell them the premise of the book, The Desert Between Us. And that is, if you lost your life prematurely, could you give yourself permission to love again? And if you could you ever love the same again?
Yeah.
Or would you always hold something in reserve for the one lost? I think the premise of the book is enough to sell
it. Tell us a little bit about the award that you won for The Desert Between Us. What award was that?
It's 2 awards. One award is called the Living Now Awards, and it's for books that provide better living. And so it won that in August of 2024, and the book was released in April of 2024. Then recently, a very prestigious award is called the Selah Awards, SELAH, and that took place on May 29th, and I took a 3rd place bronze award for The Desert Between Us, and that was won by another author for her book called A Way Back, and the 2nd place person was a book by Angela Hunt. Both of them are New York Times bestselling authors. Angela Hunt has published 165 books. Wow. And so for me to finish 3rd between those 2 significant writers, I'm honored,
That makes the 40-some rejections kind of melt away.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
Tell our audience how they can find your book and how they can connect with you.
Okay. You can find The Desert Between Us on Amazon.com, of course. You can find it on ChristianBooks.com. You can find it on Walmart.com. And you can go directly to the publisher if you want to learn more about it at endgamepress.com. I'll say that again, endgamepress.com. So there's 4 sources for you to find it. And you can even find out more about it on my website. Just go to my website, jamescmagruder.com. Again, middle initial C. You'll need to use my middle initial, jamescmagruder.com. And you can learn more about the book and my other book, The Glimpse. You can also learn about my blog. In fact, I recommend, if you want to, because I told you I'm the reflective writer, I write reflectively a lot. And I write a newsletter once a month called Pause More, Rush Less. Pause More, Rush Less. And it's all about living a more reflective life by slowing the pace you live in. And you can sign up for that right on my website.
Great.
So that's how you can get in contact with me. And of course, I'm on Facebook. It's James C. Magruder. Actually, I'd be under, I guess you'd have to look up Jim.Magruder.35. Jim.Magruder.35. And you can reach me there on Facebook. and the same address to reach me on Instagram.
As we close out, is there a message you would like to leave with our audience?
I guess I would just say that if you're a male, consider reading more fiction. Because there's an awful lot of good stories out there, and I'd like to include The Desert Between Us among that. I didn't mention before, but I'll mention it now. The Desert Between Us also has a film option being finalized right now, so they're looking at making it into a film.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that, but I'd invite you to come visit me at jamescmagruder.com and read my blog. You can read all back issues if you want to see what it's about, and consider signing up for Pause More, Rush Less. And that's a great way for us to stay in contact and for you to find out more about what I'm writing next, which is another book called The View from a Distant Mountain. And that's a story of a guy who's going to pursue his career more than his family. And he loses his family in the process. It's based on the premise that sometimes it's only when we get to the mountaintop do we realize we scaled the wrong mountain.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. Can we have a word of prayer to end it?
Please.
Great. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for Christian fiction writers. Specifically, we ask your blessing on Jim as he takes his life story and spins book after book, situation after situation off that can be a ministry and a help to other people who are grappling for something solid to hold on to. And we know that it's the depth of your love that can bring us peace and tranquility, and I believe that Jim is writing that. He's taking his faith and putting it on paper so that he can share it with people in a very non-threatening way, in a way that they can absorb it and put it to use in their life so they can see you for the kind, loving Father that you are. We ask that you just spread your loving grace over him, speak to him in ways that only you can, that his ministry continues and affects so many other people. We just give you all the praise and the thanks. In thy name we pray, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I know you're going to go forth and do great and wonderful things, Jim, and I do appreciate you taking some of your valuable time and giving it to our audience. Just hope more and more people can connect with the fine work that you do.
Thank you so much, Mike. My honor being with you. Okay?
A privilege. Thank you for joining us on the Wordsmith Forge. I hope you found today's conversation with James C. Magruder moving and meaningful. His reflections on faith, grief, and the redemptive power of story are a reminder of why Christian fiction matters. And if you're curious about The Desert Between Us, don't wait. Pick it up and experience the grace woven into every page. If you haven't already, subscribe and like the episode. And feel free to share it with someone who may be walking through a season of loss. Until next time, may God's grace overflow in your life. Stay grounded, stay inspired, and as always, keep reading clean. This is Mike Baines, out.